February 6, 1975. Orchard Lake, Michigan. Nice neighborhood, quiet streets, big lawns, the kind of place where nothing happens, where people sleep with their windows open. A rented Oldsmobile is speeding down a narrow road. It comes around a bend and nearly collides head-on with a patrol car. The cop hits his brakes. The Oldsmobile does not stop. High-speed chase. The Oldsmobile runs the police car off the road. More units called. Miles of pursuit through a Detroit suburb that has not seen a crime all year. They finally stop the car. Behind the wheel, a black man, 44 years old, scar tissue across his hands. Calm, not panicked, not running, just sitting there, like he had been expecting this moment his entire life. Officers search the vehicle. 2 semi-automatic pistols, a rifle, a sawed-off shotgun, several ounces of heroin, a stolen police uniform from Toledo, espionage equipment, cash, a lot of cash. But none of that is why 6 law enforcement agencies would spend the next 2 decades fighting over this case. In the trunk, notebooks, handwritten, meticulous, page after page after page, the names and home addresses of over 300 cops, judges, prosecutors, and politicians. The daily habits of recent murder victims documented before they were killed. Sealed grand jury files that no civilian should ever possess. Locations of every safe house, drug den, and witness in the city of Detroit. This man had been running a one-man intelligence operation more sophisticated than anything the Detroit Police Department had ever built. He had cops on payroll running license plates for him through the Law Enforcement Information Network. He had stolen a police uniform and badge. He kept surveillance equipment, disguises, aliases. The officers stared at the notebooks. Then they stared at the man. His name was Chester Wheeler Campbell. He had nicknames: Dr. Death, the Angel of Death, the Undertaker, 007. Federal authorities would later estimate he personally killed over 50 people. He was convicted of murder exactly once, in 1955. Never again. Every witness who tried to testify against him ended up dead. One was found in the protection wing of a maximum security federal prison with his throat cut and X's carved into his eyelids. When Campbell's lawyer was asked about the dead witness, he told the judge something that made the courtroom go silent. Chester does not need to be physically present to conduct business. And the most dangerous thing about Chester Wheeler Campbell was not his gun. It was not his body count. It was not even his near-genius IQ. It was the fact that the Italian mafia, the Tocco Zerilli crime family, the same organization connected to the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, did not just tolerate this man. They needed him. They funded him. They staked his crew. They gave him their drug supply lines. Because Chester Wheeler Campbell was so good at what he did that Detroit's most powerful crime family could not operate without a black man doing their killing for them. This is the story they never told you. The real 007. The real John Wick. A man who dressed only in black, attended plays and museums, studied foreign languages, kept assassins' notebooks, and built a criminal empire so terrifying that both sides of the law wanted him dead. And when they finally caught him, he looked at his cellmate and said 7 words. "I'm a dead man. Whether I stay in here or get out, brother, I'm dead." Chester Wheeler Campbell was born in 1930 in Detroit. He was the 4th of 6 children. His father died when Chester was in the 2nd grade, and his mother raised 6 kids alone. Here is what made Chester different from every other gangster you have ever heard of. He was the only one in his family who went criminal. 5 siblings, all of them law-abiding, one mother doing her best, and one son who chose a different path. By the age of 15, he was incarcerated for burglary in 1946. a child in a cell. Whatever chance he had at a normal life ended before he could drive. By the age of 20, he faced 2 more burglary charges. His photograph was already displayed in the precinct station house. The cops knew his face, and they were watching him, waiting. They did not have to wait long. On July 1st, 1955, in Detroit, on Lawton Street, Chester was 24 years old. He and 2 partners, David Green and Watson Brooks, planned to rob a numbers spot, a gambling apartment. They masked their faces with handkerchiefs. They had 2 pistols between them. Outside the apartment, they encountered Luther Mixon, 43 years old, standing near an expensive car. The robbers demanded to know who owned it. Mixon said nothing. Campbell pistol whipped him. Mixon fell and tried to get back on his feet. Campbell fired a round into his face. Then they went inside the apartment. Inside were 4 people: John and Julia Jackson, Roosevelt Williams, and Emmett Carter. They robbed them all at gunpoint and beat them. Their total take was $420, including what they pulled from the pockets of the man bleeding out in the street. $420 for a man's life. They arrested Campbell the next day. An officer recognized him from the precinct wall photo, the same photo they had been staring at for years. The witnesses from the apartment identified him in a lineup. He was charged with first-degree murder in January 1956 and sent to Michigan State Prison, known as Jackson Prison, one of the most violent penitentiaries in America. Chester Wheeler Campbell walked in as a street robber who killed a man over $420. 13 years later, he walked out as something else entirely. Here's what nobody expected. Campbell didn't waste a single day inside Jackson Prison. While other inmates fought and gambled and waited for parole, Chester studied. He studied criminal law, homicide investigation techniques, and foreign languages. He read everything he could find: books on surveillance, books on espionage, books on forensics. He scored near genius level on a court-administered IQ test. He learned new criminal trades from the most dangerous men in Michigan: safe cracking, weapons, drug distribution networks, the economics of heroin, who controlled what in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago. 13 years. That's how long Chester Wheeler Campbell spent preparing for what came next. In September 1969, he pleaded his case down to second-degree murder. The court transcript is chilling because of how calm he is. The judge asked, "Do you know where he was killed?" Campbell answered, "On the street." The judge said, "Tell me the circumstances." Campbell said, "In the process, I shot Mr. Mixon." The judge asked, "After that, what happened?" Campbell said, "I think I went through his pockets." He said it like he was recalling a trip to the grocery store. No remorse, no emotion, just facts. They paroled him in September 1969. He was 38 years old. Within 1 month, police suspected him in a double homicide. Jimmy Davis and his girlfriend Lisa were both shot execution-style in the head while sitting in a parked car. Davis had been a protected witness in trials against heroin kingpin John Klassen. The man who was supposed to be safe, who the government promised to protect, was dead with a bullet in his brain within weeks of Chester Wheeler Campbell walking free. But they could not prove it. No witnesses, no evidence connecting Campbell directly. That became the pattern. That was always the pattern. And what Chester did next would make the Italian mafia take notice. After prison, Chester Wheeler Campbell did not become a drug dealer. He did not become a gang leader. He did not try to build an empire. He became something far more valuable and far more dangerous: a freelance assassin, available to anyone who could pay his fee. His fee was $15,000 per hit, an astronomical, almost unheard-of amount in Detroit in the 1970s. But people paid it because Chester Wheeler Campbell did not just kill. He was an artist of death. He wore only black, head to toe, every day, to accentuate what he called his morbid aura. He wanted you to see him coming and to know what he was before he opened his mouth. Here is the contradiction that made him terrifying. This man, this contract killer, spent his free time attending plays, browsing museums, and studying foreign languages. He was cultured, well-spoken, and surprisingly charming. He could walk into a room full of educated people and nobody would suspect what he was. Then he could walk out of that room and execute someone in a parked car before dinner. He used aliases, Augustus Miller and others. He maintained disguises. He had a stolen Toledo police uniform, complete with badge and commander's hat, that he used for surveillance and infiltration. The badge had been reported lost by a Toledo officer who said he misplaced it while helping a disabled motorist. Campbell had probably taken it from a corrupt cop on his payroll. And the notebooks. Always the notebooks. From the moment he left Jackson Prison, Chester began building something unprecedented, a personal intelligence database. Every contact, every conversation, every license plate, every address, every habit of every person, criminal or cop, who crossed his path. He gathered information through surveillance, gossip, shadowing, payoffs, and simply talking to people, from mobsters to motorcycle clubs, hookers to hitmen, pushers to pimps, Detroit to Cleveland. He made the rounds and he wrote everything down. This was not a street thug keeping a score sheet. This was a spy operation run by one man out of the trunk of a rented Oldsmobile. He even had access to the Law Enforcement Information Network, spelled LEIN, the police database. Cops on the drug lord's payroll would run plates for him. He could identify any car, find any address, and track any person. He once told friends at a bar, drink in hand with a slight grin, that he was one of God's unfortunate creatures. He said it like a joke. It was not a joke. Picture the Louisade Social Club, East Side Detroit, early 1970s, a private Italian social club. The kind of place where men in pressed shirts drink espresso and talk business in half sentences, where the walls have no ears because nobody walks in without an invitation. Anthony Giacalone, known as Tony Jack, sits at a table. His brother Vito Giacalone, known as Billy Jack, sits beside him. These are the street-level commanders of the Taco Zerilli crime family, the Detroit Mafia. Tony Jack would later become infamous as one of the men connected to the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa on July 30th, 1975. That's who we're talking about. A black man walks through the door, head to toe in black. Nobody stops him. Nobody questions him. In a room where no black man should be welcome, Chester Wheeler Campbell sits down at the table. Because the Giacalones had a problem. The heroin trade was exploding, and whoever controlled heroin controlled Detroit. But the old arrangement was dying. The quiet black gambling bosses, who had worked for the Italians for years, doing what they were told, staying in their lane, were being replaced. A new generation, independent thinkers, volatile drug kingpins, men who didn't want to pay tribute to the Italians anymore. The Giacalones needed someone who could move through Detroit's black neighborhoods without standing out. Someone who could enforce their heroin operations in territories where an Italian face meant a bullet. Someone whose reputation alone could keep an entire side of the city in line. They didn't find that man. That man found them. Chester Wheeler. Campbell had been freelancing since prison, killing for whoever paid. But the Giacalones offered something better than a fee. They offered infrastructure, supply lines, protection, money, a permanent position in the most powerful crime organization in Michigan. Not as an employee, not as a servant, as their chosen weapon. Campbell was placed in the East Side camp, connected to a crew of black enforcers working directly under the Giacalone wing. Contract killers, extortionists, drug traffickers, a subunit of the Italian mafia staffed entirely by black men. They would later be called Murder Row, and Chester Wheeler Campbell was the reason anyone feared that name. Around late 1973, Campbell was introduced through mutual acquaintances in the mafia to two young East Side heroin dealers, Frank Usher, known as Big Frank Nitti, and Harold Morton, known as the Hawk. The Giacalone brothers had given Usher his nickname, Big Frank Nitti, after the real Chicago mobster. That tells you everything about the relationship. The Italians weren't just doing business with these men. They were mentoring them, shaping them, building them in their own image. Usher and Morton had ambition. What they lacked was fear. Nobody was afraid of two young dealers. Every corner had young dealers. Then Chester Campbell walked in. Here's how it worked. A dealer owed money, hadn't paid in weeks, thought he could outrun the debt. Campbell didn't chase him, didn't threaten him. He just parked outside the man's house in the morning, in the same rented car, in the same all-black clothes, in the same spot. For 3 days, never got out, never knocked, never said a word. On the 4th day, the man walked out with an envelope full of cash and handed it through the window. That was Chester when things went well. When things didn't go well, bodies turned up in parked cars with bullets in the back of the head and no witnesses within miles. With Campbell's reputation, the Giacalone brothers' money and supply lines, and Usher's ambition, Murder Row became the most powerful drug operation in the entire state of Michigan. Not Detroit, not the East Side, the entire state. The Michigan Federated Democratic Social Club in Midtown became their headquarters. From there, Murder Row expanded operations citywide: gambling, extortion, prostitution. But heroin was the engine. Heroin was always the engine. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. Through all of this, the killings, the heroin, the Italian mafia, Chester's mother was still alive, still in Detroit, still the same woman who raised 6 kids alone after her husband died. 5 of those kids turned out fine, church-going, law-abiding. And then there was Chester, the son who dressed in all black and came home for dinner with blood on his reputation and cash in his pockets that his mother knew better than to ask about. She never disowned him. He never stopped visiting. That's the part of Chester Wheeler Campbell that doesn't fit the legend. The part that reminds you he was a human being. A man who scored near genius on an Ike test, who could have been anything, who had a mother who loved him, and who chose to become the most feared killer in Detroit anyway. Because everyone in that city's underworld knew the same thing. If you crossed Murder Row, Chester would find you. He already had your name in his notebook. He already knew your address. He already knew what car you drove. The question wasn't whether he could find you. The question was whether you'd see him first. Chester Campbell was suspected in at least 10 homicide investigations between 1969 and 1975. 10 that police knew about. The real number, according to federal authorities, was north of 50. He was never convicted, not because police didn't try. They tried constantly. They built cases. They found witnesses. They prepared prosecutions. Then the witnesses died. In 1971, he was charged with intent to murder a star witness in a drug trial. The charges were dropped before trial. Then came the Roy Parsons case, a 1972 murder. Police had their witness, a man named James Lee Newton, street name Watusi Slim. Watusi Slim wasn't some random bystander. He was a one-time Campbell confidant and business partner. He knew everything. He could connect Chester to murders going back years. The prosecution thought they finally had the case that would put Campbell away forever. They put Watusi Slim in protective custody, a maximum security federal prison in Ohio. The protection wing, the safest place the government could put a human being short of an underground bunker. It didn't matter. Watusi Slim was found dead, throat cut, eyelids marked with X's, in the protection wing of a maximum security federal prison. The X's on the eyelids. Think about that. That wasn't just murder. That was a message to every potential witness in every pending case against Chester Wheeler Campbell. We can reach you anywhere, even in the one place the government swears is safe. All murder charges against Campbell were dropped. His lawyer stood before the judge and said it plainly. No shame, no apology. Words that echoed through Detroit's legal system like a gunshot. Chester doesn't need to be physically present to conduct business. The judge heard it. The prosecutors heard it. Every cop in Detroit heard it, and nobody could do a thing about it. February 6, 1975, the night that changed everything. Chester was driving to his girlfriend's home in Orchard Lake, a wealthy suburb. Campbell had been living two lives, killer in the streets of Detroit and gentleman caller in the quiet suburbs. His girlfriend's house was full of his belongings, weapons, documents, and more notebooks. He came around a bend and nearly hit a patrol car. Instead of stopping, instead of showing his license and playing it cool like any smart criminal would, Chester Wheeler. Campbell hit the gas. High-speed chase through a suburb that had never seen one. He ran a police car off the road. More units joined. They finally stopped him. The car was a gold mine. 2 semi-automatic pistols, a rifle, a sawed-off shotgun, several ounces of heroin, and the notebooks. When they searched his house in Detroit and his girlfriend's home in Orchard Lake, the picture got worse. Documents bearing the names, addresses, and personal details of cops, politicians, judges, gangsters, addicts, witnesses, and prosecutors, sealed grand jury files, espionage equipment, the stolen Toledo police uniform and badge, an estimated $250,000 in cash, and a list, what prosecutors would call a hit list, the names and daily habits of people who were already dead, alongside names of people who were still alive. The implication was obvious. The living names were next. Among those names, L. Brooks Patterson, a well-known assistant prosecutor in Oakland County, who would later call Campbell absolutely incorrigible and a dedicated recidivist. 6 law enforcement agencies, Detroit Police, Oakland County, Wayne County, the FBI, the DEA, and the ATF, immediately began fighting over the notebooks. Not cooperating, fighting, because whoever controlled Chester Campbell's intelligence had leverage over the entire Detroit underworld and the police forces that were supposed to be clean. The corruption ran that deep. The Detroit Free Press uncovered it obsessively. The notebooks didn't just expose criminals, they exposed the true extent of Detroit's rot. Cover-ups, bribes, homicides, espionage, racism, addiction, rampant greed. And Chester knew it. In his cell, he reportedly told a fellow inmate, "I'm a dead man. Whether I stay in here or get out, brother, I'm dead." He wasn't wrong, just not in the way he expected. With Campbell locked up, Murder Row was finished. Not immediately, but inevitably. Chester had been the fear. Without him, the crew was just drug dealers with guns, and Detroit had 1,000 of those. The power inside Murder Row shifted. A lieutenant named Doc Holliday, real name Clarence Hillary, had been waiting for his moment. With Chester gone, Doc decided the leadership needed to change, violently. One night in 1979, at the Michigan Federated Democratic Social Club, Murder Row's own headquarters, Doc Holliday ordered 3 men killed. Not rivals, not enemies. His own people, James McJoy, Herbert Jackson, Alvin Clark. 3 Murder Row members who had sided with Frank Usher over Doc in the internal struggle for control. They were shot. Then it got worse. Doc ordered the bodies dismembered, heads removed, limbs separated, body parts placed into garbage bags. And he forced Frank Usher, the founder of Murder Row, the man the Giacalones had personally mentored to participate, to pick up a blade and cut apart the bodies of men who had been loyal to him. While it happened, Doc Holliday popped a bottle of champagne, lit a fat cigar, and celebrated. Then he sent 2 men to dump the garbage bags. They were sloppy. The remains were found. The case unraveled. Usher was convicted. Doc Holliday was acquitted, but the streets have their own justice system. In 1983, someone walked up to Doc while he was having a drink at a Detroit night spot and shot him dead. The Giacalone brothers watched all of this from a distance. They had lost their enforcer. Then they had lost their crew. The most powerful black drug operation in Michigan, the one they had personally funded and built, destroyed itself in 4 years without Chester Wheeler Campbell to hold it together. They moved on. They always moved on. New crews, new enforcers, new faces, but they never found another Chester. Campbell was convicted on weapons and drug charges in Oakland County, 40 to 60 months. Wayne County added 20 to 30 months under the habitual offender statute, federal charges for the sawed-off shotgun stacked on top. He fought for his money from prison. He filed dozens of legal briefs. He railed against everyone. The courts actually ruled in his favor and ordered the $250,000 returned. But by then, the IRS had taken it. The money was gone forever. He also orchestrated things from inside. A plot to kidnap 4 judges was discovered and traced back to Campbell while he was sitting in Oakland County Jail. All 20 of Detroit's Recorder's Court judges received extra security from a man in a cell. Chester doesn't need to be physically present to conduct business. September 1984. He was paroled. He walked out into a different Detroit. Murder Row was dead. The Giacalones had moved on. The heroin game had changed. Crack was coming. New players, young players, players who had never heard of Chester Wheeler Campbell. But Chester didn't know how to be anything else. April 1985, 7 months after release, somebody shot Chester Wheeler Campbell multiple times in the leg and thigh. An 11-hour surgery saved his life. Reporters showed up at the hospital. Cameras, microphones, questions about who shot him, why, and what he planned to do about it. Chester Wheeler Campbell, the man who had killed 50 people, who had the Italian mafia on speed dial, who had kept notebooks on every cop in Detroit, looked at the reporters and said, "I don't have anything newsworthy to say." Then he went back to work. In 1987, déjà vu, Chester Wheeler Campbell was pulled over again. Same story, different year. A carload of guns, drugs, explosives, spy gear. Prosecutor L. Brooks Patterson, the same man whose name had appeared in Campbell's notebooks 12 years earlier, stood in court and called Campbell absolutely incorrigible, a dedicated recidivist and a heavy-duty criminal. The sentence was 40 years. Chester was 57 years old. He was never coming home, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. For the next 14 years, Chester Wheeler Campbell sat in a federal prison. The man who only wore black. The man who went to museums and plays. The man who studied foreign languages and kept a spy operation in his trunk. The man the Italian mafia chose above all others. He died on a prison bed in a federal medical facility in 2001. The official cause of death was end-stage liver disease, hepatitis C, natural causes. Chester Wheeler Campbell, Dr. Death, the Angel of Death, the Undertaker, 007, died of natural causes. He was 71 years old. Here's what stays with me. Chester Wheeler. Campbell killed over 50 people. He was convicted of murder exactly once in 1955 for $420. He spent 30 of his 71 years behind bars, not for the 50-plus murders, for guns, for drugs, for being caught with the wrong things in the wrong car at the wrong time. Every witness who tried to put him away for what he actually did ended up dead, including one in the most protected facility the United States government could provide. Throat cut, X marks on his eyelids. The Italian mafia, one of the most powerful crime organizations in American history, chose a black man from Detroit as their most trusted weapon. Not an employee, not a tool, a partner. A man they funded, protected, and needed. And the thing that scared everyone, cops, mobsters, prosecutors, judges, drug dealers, witnesses, wasn't the guns, it wasn't the body count, it was the notebooks. Because Chester Wheeler Campbell understood something that most criminals never grasp. Information is more dangerous than any weapon ever made. A bullet kills one person. A notebook with the right names, the right addresses, the right secrets, controls an entire city. He gathered intelligence the way a spy would: surveillance, payoffs, shadowing, contacts. He tracked everyone, and he wrote it all down. When they found those notebooks in the trunk of that Oldsmobile, 6 law enforcement agencies went to war with each other, not to bring Campbell to justice, but to control the information he had collected. Inside those pages were every dirty secret Detroit had been hiding for a decade. Those notebooks were the real weapon. That's the real story of Chester Wheeler Campbell. Not just a hitman, not just a killer. A man who turned knowledge into the most terrifying weapon in Detroit. The real John Wick did not exist in a movie. He drove a rented Oldsmobile through Orchard Lake, Michigan. The only thing that stopped him was not a rival gang, not the FBI, not the Italian mafia. It was a narrow road and a patrol car coming the other direction. One near collision. That was all that separated Chester Wheeler Campbell from never being caught at all.